Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome in to another fantastic episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. We have a new intro. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you saw it, because technology can be difficult sometimes. But we're back here on Monday, July 21st at 8 p.m. Central Time here in Austin, Texas. My name is Michael Wein, and as always, I am joined by my fantastic co-host, Mr. Emmy Nixon. And today we have another loaded show for you guys. For those of you who love Texas Longhorn sports, news, nuggets, and analysis, we got it all for you covered in today's episode. To start off, we've got more big time recruiting news as Texas lands another super blue chip commitment yesterday. Then we're going to dive into the roster and talk about some running backs, including Quintravion Wisner, who you saw in the intro, who had a big game against Oklahoma last year. And then we're going to start our Texas opponent preview series. We're going to kick it off with Ohio State, since that game is now less than 6 weeks away from kickoff. We're going to give you some early preseason thoughts on the Buckeyes and what we think, as of right now, that matchup is going to look like come August 30th. So it should be another fun episode. Um, let's just go ahead and jump right in. Emmy, what's up, man?
Nothing much. I'm back recording at home, but I'm doing it on my phone just because we still are without Wi-Fi. So shout out to AT&T for that one. Um, we've had three different appointments for them to wait, four at the different appointments for them to show up and fix our internet, and they haven't shown up once. So shout out to AT&T. Not a sponsor.
Shout out. Shout out to internet problems and shout out to technology. Hopefully, it cooperates to the best of its ability for the next 50 or so minutes. Um, let's jump right in. First of all, I want to thank everybody watching this video, or if you are a fan of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, or you've been watching Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports since it began. Remember, we have a new channel. Our episodes are going to be posted over there now. They will be posted on both channels leading up to football season, but once we get to football season, it will be its own separate channel. So we'll give you guys time to get over there. The reason I say thank you, though, is the James Johnson Tyler Atkinson episode that we did last week that was just released just about 48 hours ago, a little over that, is already up to close to, I think, 50 views. So I really appreciate the support on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. This show, I think, continues to grow, just like the Texas Longhorn 2026 recruiting class continues to grow with super blue chip elite level talent. And that's where we start tonight's show, Emmy, as yesterday, after getting 2 5 stars on Tuesday with James Johnson, the defensive lineman from the state of Florida, and Tyler Atkinson, the number one linebacker from the state of Georgia, Texas goes back into South Florida to land super blue chip prospect at running back in the form of Chaminade Madonna star Derrek Cooper. Um, this is an important one. Here's my bit on Derrek Cooper. So, if we look at where he is ranked nationally, ESPN, he's a 5 star. They rank him as a 5 star prospect, number 7 overall nationally, and the number 1 overall running back in the state. They have the highest ranking, the highest view of Derrek Cooper. Um, when you look at 24/7, he's a super blue chip. He's a high 4 star, ranked 40th nationally, the third ranked running back in the country. And when you look at the rivals industry ranking, he's number 37 nationally, the number 2 running back in the country, and the number 6 overall prospect in the state of Florida. So this is a kid who is viewed as a top 5-6 prospect in the state of Florida, a top 3 player at his position in the country, and a consensus super blue chip talent. Um, Now, the interesting thing about his recruitment, before I pass it over to you for some thoughts on Derrek Cooper and his commitment to the Horns, is he didn't actually take an official visit to Texas. In fact, at the end of June, at the Rivals 5-star camp that was held after official visit season, he had told Texas reporters that Texas wasn't even in the race. They weren't even one of his 5 finalists. And so I think, Texas did the thing where they said, okay, we might not be able to build the deepest recruiting class in the country this year like we did last year, but we want our top 8 to 10 guys to be better than anyone else's top 8 to 10 guys. And we're missing a difference maker at the running back position. And after missing on Xavier Crowell earlier this month, a guy that they really wanted, after missing on KJ Edwards in state earlier this month, a guy that they really wanted, Derrek Cooper was like their lone outstanding super blue chip high level talent at the position. And so I think they went a little bit further from an NIL standpoint to get him on board. But he did not take an official visit to Texas. He took an official visit to Miami, Ohio State, Penn State, Florida State, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn. So he made a lot of official visits, 7, I think, but not to Texas. So I think things have changed in the world of recruiting today where maybe you don't have to take an official visit to commit somewhere because there are so many other substantial factors involved in these kids' recruitment with NIL, revenue sharing, relationships with coaches, unofficial visits. All these things factor into a kid's recruitment. So, Emmy, I'll pass it over to you for some thoughts on Derrek Cooper and his commitment to Texas.
Yeah, Texas needed a running back in this class. We've talked about that at length on this show, and I think you know whoever that was going to be, I think Texas was hoping for it to be just. I mean, a, okay, I don't know what Texas was hoping for, but I know what I was hoping for was just someone, you know, above the 4-star level that could come in and develop for your behind Wisner, Gibson, Clark, and those guys. Um, Not a guy that probably wouldn't expect to play right away, but someone that can come in and learn. But this guy is a level above that, clearly. And I don't know how you feel about, how you would grade him versus CJ Baxter when he was coming out. But I think I view Cooper a little bit more highly, honestly.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, for a guy with he's similar in physical profile to CJ Baxter. For a guy that's 6'1", 205, 210, with 10.77 speed in the 100 meters in his junior year, he's got the prototypical size that you want. The thing that I really like about him is he's a north-south runner, and he doesn't waste much movement. I think we're in an era of running backs where you see um, a lot of patient runners, guys who want to set up the holes in front of them, guys that might not, hit the hole right away. But this guy, once he gets to the second and third level, it's hard to catch him because he gets from the first level to the third level in a blur, which makes him a handful to handle in open space. And this might seem wild to some people, but I think, and again, not saying that he's going to be anywhere close to this player or be this player, but he's got a little Adrian Peterson in him, the way that he runs. That's all I'm going to say. Just a little bit. If you really watch the way that this kid plays. And then another thing about him that I like
The high.
is his versatility. He's one of the best high school backs in this class at catching the football out of the backfield. And what do we know about Sark's offense? We know that he loves to throw those wheel routes, those misdirection screen plays to running backs. And we saw in the highlight video. We saw it a bunch in that Oklahoma game with Trey Wisner. We saw it in the Ohio State game, a game that they lost. But who was it? It was Jaden Blue caught two wheel routes for touchdowns in that game. The only points Texas scored in that game. So,
Yeah.
they love throwing the football to their running backs, and I think from a scheme standpoint, Derek Cooper is a guy that really fits that. So I think he's a very well-rounded prospect, a difference maker at the position. The question is, going into next year, could he, let's just say for the sake of argument that CJ Baxter and Trey Wisner are back, and Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark. Could he supplant any of those main four guys as a freshman and get playing time as a freshman? I don't think he starts as a freshman at Texas, but could he supplant any of those guys? I definitely think he's talented enough to do that. It's just, will it happen fast enough? Will his rate of development happen fast enough? And will he be able to learn Sark's offense fast enough to get playing time in his freshman year? But I think definitely by his second year at Texas, he will be a guy that, similarly to C.J. Baxter, except in Baxter's case, he had a horrific injury, will be the projected starter in this offense. I think he's the heir apparent to C.J. Baxter. So, any other thoughts on Derrek Cooper before we move on to talking about the actual running backs on this roster?
No, no. I think it's just all about developing those ancillary, like supplemental skills, like how it is with a lot of young running backs. It's gonna be the pass blocking, like the blitz pickup, and just being able to run the right route, being able to like know Sark's offense, like you said. Like there's gonna be a lot of you know mental checks that he has to be able to hit those checkpoints in order to get playing time in his freshman season. So we'll see.
C.J. Baxter was a truly elite prospect, but I think that Cooper is just a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more. He brings a little bit more versatility and athleticism to his game coming out of high school than Baxter did. In that he's a guy that in high school played some receiver, he's played some linebacker, he's played some safety, and I think he's got a little more straightaway speed than Baxter did. But both are elite prospects in their own right. So I think Derek Cooper has a little bit of Michael Terry in him, along with a little bit of C.J. Baxter in him. If you really combine those two guys, I think that's what Derek Cooper is. So yeah, go watch his highlight tape. It is a joy to watch on Huddle, and I'm excited to see what he's got in store for his freshman year. And I don't know if you can hear that, but that is my dog barking. Excuse my dog barking in the background, if you can hear that. Let's move on. I want to dive into. I want to start since we're less than 6 weeks away. I want to start diving into the Longhorns roster. And since we're already talking about running backs, why not just start at the running back position? A very interesting position to talk about this year. So I've got 3 questions for us to answer. Okay, Emmy, in terms of the running backs on this roster. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. The first question: how good is Trey Wisner? The reason I ask this question is, he was selected first team All SEC. He led the SEC in rushing last year on a whim. But I still have, for whatever reason, I think Texas fans and people in general have some questions about his ability to carry a full workload over the course of a 15, 16 game season. So I just want to ask you, like, how good do you think Trey Wisner is? Do you think he is a like day 2, day 3 potential level running back? Do you think he's a lead back on this Texas roster in the SEC? Like, what level of running back do you actually think he is?
I think he's with the production that he had last year, he's earned the right to at least have 8 to 10 touches a game. I think the ideal role for Trey Wisner is him in a committee type of backfield where he's splitting carries, getting some touches out of the backfield in the passing game as well. I see him as extremely polished running back in terms of being able to set up his blocks, like being able to see the hole. His vision is top tier. But in terms of physical tools, he's a step below some of the other guys we have on this roster, which makes it a little bit harder when you get out into the open field and he's not a speed back, he's not a power back either. He's kind of a I don't want to say a tweener, but he's not like elite at either of those, but he's good at both. Like he has good, like okay to good speed, and he's like okay to good power, but it's not like elite level physical ability, which makes it, which makes his perception among the fan base a little bit lower than maybe um, what you would see people when they talk about C.J. Baxter, for example. So I think Trey Wisner is a really good running back, and I see him as a kind of guy that can go into the league and have a really solid career just because he knows how to play the position. He just knows how to hit the hole and just he doesn't waste any movement. There's no false steps in his game, and he can break a good amount of tackles, and he's just productive. You can't really explain it any other way.
Yeah, I mean he capitalized on his in-season opportunity to take over the lead back role last year and became an 1,000-yard rusher. He cemented himself as a hardworking fan favorite. And look, Texas fans owe him like a lot of appreciation and gratitude uh, for stepping up
Absolutely.
in a running back room that was devastated by injury, um, and marred by inconsistency, from a bunch of different guys. I mean, Jaden Blue, super explosive, but had his issues with fumbles. Um, there were times last year where Texas couldn't run the ball, couldn't muster much in the run game. You know, with in that game against Georgia at home, in the SEC championship game.
Yeah,
Um, but football isn't built on. A running back is evaluated by the value that it adds to the offense that it's in. I think, like you said, Wisner's a selfless player. Coaches rave about his effort. He's super coachable. He's made a name for himself on special teams, which is also really important to Sarkisian. But I largely agree with you in that I have my skeptic, like there's a skeptical side of me that questions whether or not he can sustain being a lead back that averages over 5 yards a carry in the SEC over the course of 15 or 16 games, because there were times last year where it just didn't look right. I think it was more telling later on in the season against Arizona State and Ohio State in the playoffs. He averaged 2.6 yards per carry, and he repeatedly fell at like the first contact. Um, so
yeah,
I think he's a really good player. I definitely think he's a top two running back on this team. I think he could be really productive in a role where he's getting maybe anywhere between 10 and 15 touches per game. And when I say touches, that combines, you know, carries and receptions. I think you can design certain plays for him to where he can catch the ball in the backfield and go on little tunnel screens, and I think you can get solid production out of him if he's getting the ball, say, maybe 8 to 10 carries per game instead of 20 to 30 carries per game. I think that's built more for a workhorse back like a Bijan Robinson or what we think C.J. Baxter could end up being, or a Derrek Cooper type. Um, but what Trey Wisner is a guy that I think, if he produces over the next season or two, will get drafted into the NFL. Where does he get drafted? I don't know. But that's damn good for a guy that came out of high school as a 3-star, wasn't really nationally recruited, and has just made a name for himself. So he was one of the unsung heroes of last year's team. Because if he didn't step up, who was going to
definitely.
step up? Let's talk about. Um,
Yeah, and no
Go
way we
ahead.
make it as far as we do without Trey Wisner.
No.
Yeah, there's just no way that Texas makes it to the semifinal without Trey Wisner. There's just no way.
Before we get to C.J. Baxter,
But go
um,
ahead.
yeah, before we touch on C.J. Baxter, I have a fun question. Because Texas did bring in a very exciting running back class last year, in Christian Clark and Jarrett Gibson. Gibson was a more like nationally rated prospect, closer to being a super blue chip than Clark was. But a lot of Texas fans actually like Clark more, or liked Christian Clark more coming out of high school than Jarrett Gibson for whatever reason. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm just saying for whatever reason because I don't actually know
Yeah.
why. Um, so Emmy, what do you think? Who do you have higher expectations for this year, Jarrett Gibson or Christian Clark?
Well, I think the easy answer would have been Jarrett Gibson before we knew what practice was going to be like for these guys. But knowing what happened in spring practice and knowing how good Christian Clark looked in spring practice, um, I think he's gained the, you know, not approval, but the trust of this coaching staff, and I think he'll get on the field. Maybe even a little bit more than Jarrett Gibson. I'm not sure where Jarrett Gibson stands because in the limited playing time he got last year, he was okay, but he had a fumble. here and there. He was prone to the mistake here and there as well that freshmen tend to make. Probably got in there a little bit before he was ready just because of the need on that Texas football team last year. So going into year two, I think if I'm Jared Gibson, like training camp, you want to at least be running back 3. I think that's like the very least. Like you want to feel like you um, earned that spot, given you had that year of experience over Christian Clark. I think Christian Clark was injured, but right now it just doesn't feel that way. So in terms of expectations, I'm feeling a little bit better about Christian Clark right now. Also, I think just um, he's a smaller kind of speed back, and I think that's kind of what Texas needs right
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Now, I do think it's going to end up being for this particular team running back by committee, just because 2 of the 4 guys that we're talking about tonight are coming off major injuries, and you just never know what that brings, right? And how good they can actually be coming off those injuries. It's one thing to do it in shorts and t-shirts. It's another thing to do it against Georgia when 270, 300-pound physical freaks are twisting and, you know, nabbing at your knees, diving at your knees, diving at your ankles, you know, in the SEC against the Oklahoma defenses of the world and the Georgia defenses of the world. Um, it's easier said than done, obviously. Jarek Gibson has kind of that baby rhino to him in that I think in short yardage, as long as he can hold on to the football, something that he needs to definitely get better at this season, I kind of give him a pass because he was a freshman, but he did kind of have a penchant for fumbles similarly to Jaden Blue last year when he got in the game. Now, he was productive. He rushed for 374 yards over the course of his freshman season. And he flashed kind of those pile moving abilities because he's such a strong, thick, strong running back. And he's really good as a short yardage back, a guy who I think Texas could utilize a lot down near the goal line. But he's going to need to develop that trust with Chad Scott in this coaching staff because he did fumble 3 times in his 78 carries. That's not good at all. No coach likes fumbles, but for an aspiring finisher and short yardage back, fumbling is simply not acceptable. So I think Gibson has a more like coming off the Achilles. I don't know exactly what or how Christian Clark is going to be utilized. I think we'll know more once we get into fall camp. I think Jarek Gibson has a slight advantage over him right now just because I think he has a more defined role. But I think when it comes to who could do more this season, who do I have higher expectations for maybe long term? I think that's where Christian Clark comes into play. Partially tore his Achilles, but he's recovered incredibly fast, incredibly well. And, after tireless rehab, he was a full participant in spring practice, something nobody really expected. We won't really know what we have in Christian Clark until the pads come on in fall practice, right? But I think his 2024 or his 2025 contribution to this Texas team could be pretty significant if he can win and overtake Gibson for that number 3 role. Because that's kind of the conversation that we're having here. Gibson against Clark for the number 3 running back role. As long as we're assuming that Wisner and Baxter are some form of 1 or 2. So I'm really excited about both guys. I think how explosive is Clark coming off that injury? Because if he looks similar to the guy that we saw coming out of high school with another year of technically development and practices layered onto that, he could be a big time player. So right to start the season, it's probably going to be Gibson, as long as he can take care of the football, because he's been in some big games already. But over the course of the long term, I think it'll be Clark, because I just think his skill set is more versatile, if that makes sense. So, with all that being said, let's talk a little bit about CJ Baxter. Baxter is coming off 2 consecutive seasons that were both thwarted by injury. Okay, the latest being a horrific knee injury that he suffered last fall camp, almost a year ago. PCL and LCL torn. First day of full pads last spring, or last fall. That forced him to miss the entire 2024 season. He was expected to be the top dog lead back, and that injury just set things back a whole nother year. So what do we think is CJ Baxter? In his freshman year, the year before last year, before suffering this injury, he totaled 659 rushing yards, caught 24 balls out of the backfield, averaged 4.8 yards per carry, 6.5 yards per rush, per catch, which made him an outlier compared to Brooks and Blue, who both averaged 6.1 yards per carry and combined 10.8 yards per catch. So it was a productive freshman season for Baxter, but it wasn't quite spectacular. Like 4.8 yards per carry, it's not actually that great when it comes to Power 4 elite level running back play in the SEC. You'd like to be over 5 yards per carry. That's what we last saw of CJ Baxter. And then he gets the injury. What we know about him now is he was cleared in June to participate fully in 7-on-7 drills. He's been going in summer workouts. He looks pretty good. He's technically good to go for fall camp here in about 8 or 9 days when it begins. I think on June 30th is the date that practice starts. July 30th. July, yes. As long as he doesn't suffer another setback, he'll be good to go. What do I want to see from CJ Baxter? Well, I want him to be a top 2 running back on this team. I think he needs to be that. No. Who said you could bark in the middle of the podcast? Anyways, he needs to average over 5 yards per carry. I'm just curious to see how does that knee hold up against the grind of the SEC. But there was a time earlier on this spring where people were reporting that they didn't know if CJ Baxter was going to even be able to come back until maybe like the middle of the season because of the injury. Like his rehabilitation process just wasn't progressing along as fast as they thought it was going to be at a point in time in spring ball. Um, Luckily for Texas, though, that looks like it's changed, and that CJ Baxter will be able to, as long as he makes it through fall practice okay, will be able to be a part of this running back room right away against Ohio State. And why do you like that? It's because he's got big game experience already, coming from his freshman year. So if CJ Baxter is a guy who averages over 5 yards per carry, maybe carries the ball 15, 20 times, and it's just a productive running back in that way, I'll be ecstatic, because coming off that injury, I think that would be a successful season. I don't care as much as the mere total of his production as I do what is his production per time that he carries the football. Can he be better in that area than Trey Wisner is? That's the battle. Because the guy that's more productive, I think Texas could play a game where they kind of ride the hot hand at running back. So, Emmy, what are your
And
thoughts
will he be
on
better
what
than
are your
Trey Wisner? Yeah, and will he be better than Trey Wisner against the elite competition that Trey Wisner struggled with last year? That's also the question. So Texas
Yep.
needs that higher level of athleticism at the running back position to show up this year, because we play Ohio State, we play Florida at Florida, we play Georgia. You know, Oklahoma's going to come back with a better team this year. So we I think, need that extra level of juice at the position, even if it's switching off between those two. I think it'll be a nice balance between them if TJ Baxter is feeling healthy. That's the thing. And whether he starts feeling healthy week 10 or whether he starts feeling healthy week 1, the main thing is he going to be healthy in the closing stretch of the season? Is he going to be feeling good in the closing stretch of the season? Because that's when Texas is going to be. I feel like Texas can get through the regular season with a good enough record to make the playoff without a healthy, or I shouldn't say healthy, without a 100% CJ Baxter, but they do need that 100% CJ Baxter when it comes to playoff time.
Yes. Um, yeah. That's really all that needs to be said. So that's a little preview of the running back position. Now there are some other guys on the depth chart. Texas does bring in Ricky Stort and James Simon as two true freshmen, who, if called upon in any significant way, probably not a good thing overall for Texas if that ends up happening. That means one or both. I mean, it could be. It could just be that James Simon is really good and he overtakes, Christian Clark or Derrek Gibson. But likely what that means is either Clark and Baxter suffer setbacks, another injury happens. I just don't really expect Stort or Simon to make a significant impact this year. But those are two exciting guys that could develop into something exciting. Neither were like
Right.
super blue chips, but they're good players. So we'll see what happens with those guys. They also have a senior walk-on who played a little bit last year in Colin Page. He got some run. And look, if they go to 105 scholarships at any point, that guy will probably be getting a scholarship just because there will be so many extra scholarships to work with. But he actually had some fine moments last year. Hopefully they don't get to the point where they have to use any of those guys significantly this year, but you never know.
Yeah.
All right, to wrap up today's show, I want to start a series where we preview. We've got 5 weeks or so, 5.5-ish weeks till the season starts. I want to preview the 5 biggest games on this Texas schedule. Not like previewing the matchup, but previewing the opponents. Talking a little bit about Ohio State, Florida, Oklahoma, Georgia, and A&M. Those would be what I consider the 5 biggest games this year. Um, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Buckeyes. Um, Defending national champions, Emmy. They do lose a lot, but they still have a ton of talent on this team, and it can be argued that they've despite losing all that talent to the NFL, they've still got the best offensive player in college football in Jeremiah Smith, and they've got the best defensive player in college football in Caleb Downs. So I came up with a couple questions. Um, I guess let's start here. What is your early feel right now on this week 1 matchup in Columbus between Texas and Ohio State, as both teams are replacing their quarterbacks and both teams are replacing a ton of talent that left to the NFL? What's your early feel on this matchup?
My early feel is that it's probably a coin flip. I think with these two teams being like as good as they are, it really just comes down to which team is going to be in the right headspace, like come week 1 to come out of the gate firing. Like I expect maybe some mistakes early on in that game, some chaos. I mean, it's a week 1 game, so we can't expect these teams to be completely sharp as they would be in a playoff matchup. I mean, I think from a Ohio State standpoint, um, the thing that I question is a lot of the talk has been, oh, Julian Sayin doesn't have to play that great. Will Howard won the national championship for them last year. He didn't even play that good. And my counter to that is during that playoff run, Will Howard had a switch flip for him. He did not play like regular season Will Howard in that playoff run. He played pretty well. Like he played uh, like a legitimately good college quarterback. So for Ohio State to reach the goals they want to reach, and obviously in this week 1 game as well, Julian Sayin has to at least be at the start of the season at a baseline level of mediocrity and build up from there. I think he could be better than that from the start, but at the very least, they need that baseline of quarterback play to be able to compete in this game. Because that's the side where Texas has a clear edge. Is Arch Manning has at least those 4 games under his belt, and of course, has that experience with these receivers, sitting 2 years, has worked with Wingo in practice and more in practice over and over and over again. So it plays to Texas's advantage from that aspect.
Yeah. Look, this game's at the shoe, so it's gonna be a raucous environment, even though Texas does catch a little bit of a break in the case that it's an 11 a.m. kick, not a 7 p.m. kick. Um, Look, I think if you go into the game and you rank the top 10 players in this game, I think you're pretty even. Like, I'm not going to do it right now, but I think you're pretty even. 5, maybe 6, 4. If you were to rank who are the top 10 football players in this game, because Anthony Hill would be on the list, Jeremiah Smith would be on the list, Colin Simmons would be on the list, Caleb Downs would be on the list. Beyond that, I mean, you can pick and choose because it's still like a who's who of like elite of the elite talent on both of these teams. Um, Here are my questions for the Buckeyes. They're actually somewhat similar to Texas. They're replacing a new quarterback, and they're also replacing both coordinators. That's actually an area where I do favor Texas. Jim Knowles, great defensive coordinator, Ohio State's defense took it to another level last year in the playoff. They demolished Tennessee. God, that was ugly. They demolished Oregon. They took it. They took it to Texas pretty good, in that they only gave up 14 points. And then Notre Dame probably put up the best fight, but they took it to them too. Like, that defense last year in the playoff was incredible. Towards the end of the season, and Jim Knowles had a big part to do with it. Um, so replacing both coordinators, is Brian Hartline ready? As he's been one of the best position coaches in college football for a number of years, developing receiver talent after receiver talent. It's been a wide receiver factory at Ohio State. I think he's a really good football coach, elite football coach, some would say. But is he ready to take on that against facing what I think will be still one of the best defenses in college football, with a hell of a pass rush that includes Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill, Ethan Burke, all these guys that we've talked about all offseason, right? This pass rush for Texas, how good we think it's going to be. Trey Moore. Is Julian Sayin and this new offensive coaching staff ready to handle that in its first game? Now they could just say, hey, throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith and let's work things out. Throw the ball to Max Clare, the tight end you brought in from Purdue. We'll work things out. We're playing at home. We have the advantage there. But I think if you were to ask Julian Sayin and you were to ask Ryan Day, what defense do you want to face your first game of the season? I don't know if they say Texas. I in fact know they probably don't say Texas. So that's going to be a challenge for them. And then I want to see their defensive line. They are replacing a lot on the defensive line, as is Texas. That'll be an interesting thing to watch in this game. And then the run game will be a bit of a mystery because they lose both of their running backs. They lose Kingshawn Judkins, and they lose what is the other guy's name?
Travion Henderson.
Travion Henderson.
Travion.
Travion Henderson.
Yeah.
They lost both those guys. I think the receiving talent will be fine. They still have Carnell Tate. They still got Jeremiah Smith. They still got a bunch of guys on that, still got Brandon Innes, another 5-star. They bring in Max Clare from Purdue, one of the best tight ends in college football. The key for Ohio State in that game will be, one, can they run the football on Texas? And two, can Julian Sayin take care of the football? Which quarterback takes care of the football is going to go a long ways to determining who wins that game. And a lot of that, I think, is going to be which offensive line plays better, because both offensive lines are replacing NFL players. So I think the two teams mirror each other in a lot of the similar ways, in that they're both bringing in new quarterbacks. They both lost a lot on the offensive line and defensive line. They both had their share of questions on both sides of the ball that need to be answered. But they both have a shit ton of super blue chip level talent. It's just who's going to step up. And I think to wrap up this conversation, I might actually I don't know what you think, Emmy. I know Ohio State will probably be a 2.5, 3-point favorite because of the home field advantage, and I get that. But I slightly favor Texas just because of how good they've been on the road the past 2 years. And number two, I just think the coordinator advantage, the coaching staff advantage, the coordinator continuity there, gives Texas a slight step up. And I think the defense against a real first-year starter, I don't know who I'm going to pick yet in the game. Ohio State could win the game by 14, 21 points. That could happen. But what I'm saying is there are certain areas as a Texas fan where I look at it and say that could play into Texas's favor. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I slightly lean Texas as well. And it just comes right back to Arch Manning. To be honest, I don't know how to gauge how well Arch Manning will play in that type of environment. But I mean, we've seen him make plays on big stages before. He popped in the Georgia game at home, of course, but he played a little bit in the Texas A&M game at College Station at Kyle Field. This is not,
Yep,
going to be his absolute first rodeo. He's been on the sidelines in these environments,
exactly.
and he's also a man. So that's the other thing.
Yeah. All right. Um, Here's a quick parting shot. Do you think there? This might seem like a crazy question, um, but it has been asked by different people. So I thought I'd ask it to you. Um, is there still pressure on Ryan Day despite winning a national championship last year? Not maybe in terms of like his job security, but just pressure. Because the dude hasn't beaten Michigan in I don't know how long.
I think he's got to get that monkey off his back at some point, because you're Ohio State at the end of the day, and that's a big game on your schedule. Like, think about it this way: if a Texas coach lost to Oklahoma 5 times in a row, I don't know how we would react to that either. I mean, regardless of the team winning a national championship, there's just, you know, there's just a level of just you want to have those bragging rights. That's a bigger, like that's a geographical rivalry more than just a football rivalry. That is just a complete state on state like bragging rights type of like battle. I mean, it's a lot more than just a football game up there.
Yeah,
So yeah, there
it's
is pressure, but on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a whole lot lower. I'll give him that. It's probably like 6, 5, maybe.
I think it's just a little bit of an internal pressure from Ohio State fans who like if you're the head coach at Texas, if you're Steve Sarkisian, you can't go on a prolonged losing streak against either A&M or Oklahoma. And it's not just because it's a heated rivalry on the field, and we love that. We love rivalries in sports, not just college football. But there is something special to the big time rivalries in college football. Um, but like if you're losing, like if you're Texas and you start losing to Oklahoma every year, Oklahoma's going to use that against you in recruiting. They just are. They did it for years in the
Yeah,
Big 12 when Texas was down. It extends beyond, like the effect of that extends beyond just on the football field on that particular day in that particular football game.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and same thing, like it'd be even more dangerous with A&M, I'd argue, because A&M's they can match resource for resource pretty much with Texas. And so if you start losing to A&M on the field, A&M can then turn around and go tell a guy like make someone up, Michael Fasusi or someone like that, one of these 5-star elite prospects. Hey, we're beating Texas on the field. Come play for us. Um, we keep beating them on the field. I don't think that's going to be a problem for Texas, but it could, especially if Michigan, has their shit together again offensively with a 5-star quarterback in Bryce Underwood. If they go out and beat Ohio State again this year, um, people are going to want to go play at Michigan because they're going to have the quarterback. They're going to have they've really picked up in terms of NIL what they're spending in recruiting. So I just think there's a little bit of internal pressure from the Ohio State fan base to win that game this year. I don't know
That's,
exactly where that game is. Is it at Michigan or is it at the Shoe this year?
I
I
want to
don't
say it's
remember
at the
for
Big
sure,
House,
but yeah,
but
they got to
I
win
think
that
it's
game,
also just
especially.
becomes within that building as well. I mean, if you're a Ohio State player as a senior, you have never beaten Michigan as an Ohio State player. So there's just going to be so much pressure on that game, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse every year that they lose.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, guys. Well, we did that really efficiently. We're wrapping up right about 55 minutes. So I appreciate all of your support. As I mentioned earlier on this episode, we're pumping out an episode every single week. And before you know it, we'll be in the fall camp. Next week, we'll probably have some nuggets to discuss. Um, we're right smack dab in the middle of recruiting, and college football season is less than 6 weeks away. So we're barreling towards football. Football season is truly around the corner. And if you don't believe it, I know it's just preseason, but the Hall of Fame game is literally like 10 days from right now. So training camps start this week in the NFL. Fall camps start next week in college football. It's going to be a great time. Emmy, any last parting shots before I sign us off?
Well, I think this podcast is slowly becoming our top priority with the amount of support it's been getting, and obviously we're both very appreciative of that. And I think this is only the beginning, man. We just created a new intro for it. Hopefully that doesn't get our channel taken down, but that's a separate issue. But I think this is only the beginning. This is it's only up from here. I'm really excited about it.
Same here. So enjoy the rest of your week. This will be out Thursday or Friday. I'm hoping Saturday at the latest. Our schedules just get busy, so give us a little bit of leeway, but we'll have it up. Um, and yeah, we'll have a bunch more next week. I don't know what positions we'll be diving into. Um, maybe next week's finally the time to like have the in-depth Arch Manning conversation. We'll see. But
And
there will be a lot to talk about.
possibly an in-person
So
pod since I'm starting a new job. We'll see about that too.
potentially, yes. Um,
Potentially.
so that's gonna do it. Um, get excited for Texas Longhorns football season. Get excited for college football. We've got so much content coming for you guys here in the coming weeks leading up to it. And we'll see you next time here on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Hook 'em.
Welcome. Peace out.